Today's video is brought to you by that 80-year-old grandmother named Mildred at your church who constantly hounds you and your worship team about playing more hymns like they sang back in the good old days. Just kidding. But today in our modern worship services, is there still a place for good old-fashioned hymns? Well, I'm going to come right out and say it. Yes, there is. Hymns are one of the greatest gifts that we have received from previous generations of Christians, and they are a great tool that we can use in our worship services to help edify our congregations and encourage congregational participation in worship. And today in this video, you are going to hear my interview with Nathan Drake from ReawakenHymns.com, and he is going to share 4 reasons why you should be incorporating hymns into your worship gatherings. My name is Jake Goslin with churchfront.com, an online resource for innovative and creative church leaders. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church. And make sure you check out the show notes below this video in the description for links to free resources for your worship ministry, as well as some quick navigation links to navigate through this longer video. And you can also listen to this interview on the Churchfront podcast. That's also linked below. So without further ado, here's my interview with Nathan Drake of Reawaken Hymns, and he's going to share 4 reasons why you should be incorporating hymns in your worship gatherings. Nathan Drake, welcome back to the Churchfront podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me a second time. This is awesome.
Yeah, man. Either, you're such a stellar guy and you have so much great things to share, that's why you're coming back on the podcast, or maybe I'm just really desperate for guests to have on the podcast.
I won't comment on which one of those is correct. So
no, it's definitely the former of those two. You're up to a lot of cool stuff. So for folks who didn't hear the first session that I had with you when we talked about Minus Studio and tools for the broke worship leader, which you can, if you're listening to this, you want to learn about tools for the broke worship leader, go just search my podcast, search a YouTube channel. But go ahead and just introduce yourself for folks who have not get to know you yet.
All right. I am Nathan Drake. As you said, I lead a small church plant here in St. Louis, as you lead a small church plant as well. So Minus Studio is my newer I have 2 online ministries, I would say. Minus Studio is the newer one, and that's just where I kind of goof around with making cheap worship resources, making DIY things and worship hacks and just trying to do things different and showing off my cheapskate skills, because that's about the only thing I'm really expert in, is being a cheapskate. So that's Minus Studio. And then my other thing, my other online ministry is Reawaken Hymns. That one's the one I've been doing for about 3 years now. And that is a resource. It's a free resource for worship leaders who want to use hymns in modern worship services. So if you go to my website, www.reawakenhymns.com, you'll see like 60 or 70 hymns that all have free chord sheets and videos you can watch on how to do them. And you can download the PDF chord sheets for free too. So that's what that is. It's just so that it will be easier for worship leaders to use hymns in modern worship services.
And that's the topic of our conversation today. So our last conversation, we talked more about what you're doing with Minus Studio. And yeah, guys, go follow or subscribe to his channel on YouTube, because like every week he's coming out with at least one great video on these different little hacks you can incorporate into your ministry to save money, but still get the job done well for the different things we have to do as worship leaders.
I haven't figured out how to put out like 18 videos like some people do.
Dude, I love content creation and stuff like that, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But go subscribe to Minus Studio, and then one more thing I love about Minus Studio is Ronald.
Ronald.
So if you want to know who Ronald is, who we're talking about, make sure just go subscribe to his channel. But let's talk about your other ministry though today, the hymns, the Reawaken Hymns. So hymns kind of, when we hear that word hymns, I think there's a lot of kind of almost emotional baggage or connotations that the word has. Maybe we hear that word and we think, man, isn't that the old stuff they used to sing in churches? Like today, we have more new songs being written than ever. You know, the Christian music industrial complex is stronger than ever. Like you've got people just cranking out music from Hillsong and Nashville. Like what's the purpose of hymns? Are they even relevant in today's contemporary worship services? So yes, they are relevant. I'll go ahead and say that up front. I mean, but it's still a question. I think maybe a lot of worship leaders haven't really had much interaction with incorporating hymnody into their church, especially if they are in a more contemporary church. So I thought it'd be fun to have the expert on the whole idea of reawakening hymns for contemporary churches to use them on the podcast, on the YouTube channel, to share just a little bit of helpful perspective and just give us some guidance on if we're going to start using hymns, like why we should use hymns, and then what's the best way to go about doing that. So without further ado, I just want you to kind of take it away and help us kind of frame this conversation for us.
All right. You already answered my question. Hymns are still relevant, so we're good. That's the end of the podcast, right?
Perfect. Yeah,
okay,
That's it.
All right, I'll talk a little bit about maybe why they're relevant. So why hymns are relevant. Like you mentioned, there's just ridiculous amounts of worship music coming out nowadays, and that's true. There also happens to be like ridiculous amounts of like modern art coming out these days. But when I go to an art museum, I don't like only go to the modern art part. Wow. Modern art part. I don't just go to that, I go to all the other stuff. I go to the impressionists of the 1600s and the medieval art and art from billions of years ago. But, you don't just, there's so much more going on. And it's the same reason that hymns are still relevant in modern worship is the same reason that I still enjoy a Van Gogh painting, is that art doesn't really expire. And so I have 4-ish reasons for us today of why to use hymns. And I'm actually not really trying to convince anybody to use hymns in their worship service. I'm trying to convince them to not use hymns. You know what I'm saying? Not
use hymns. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, you got that. Right. Don't exclude them on purpose is my point.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes worship leaders make today is probably choosing songs based on impact rather than substance. They pick like Hillsong is amazing at this. Like every song of theirs is like an epic worship anthem, and it hooks us, and it hooks me. And I do way too many Hillsong worship songs in my church too. But we have to kind of get past that. Sometimes we have to say, hold on, there's got to be something deeper than that, just impact. And that's kind of where hymns come in, because a lot of hymns have a lot of substance. So I'm going to get into the 4 reasons. But before that, I want to talk about one reason that's probably not a reason to use hymns. And it's also usually touted as the most popular reason why you should use hymns. So if you've read any article like online that's like, oh, you should use hymns again, or not using hymns is killing your church, or whatever they want to clickbait call it. The main reason they say is singability, right? Hymns are more singable than contemporary songs. And that's not really true at all.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hymns that are really hard to sing. There's a lot of modern worship songs that are really easy to sing. And that part's really just about your worship leader, or you in this case, choosing the right songs, not choosing songs that can only be sung by Carrie Job, choose songs that people can sing. Just some hymns that come to mind that are like really hard to sing too, though, are like Jesus Paid It All. Like that Jesus Paid It All, that's like a minor sixth or something. Like that's a weird note. Or Near My God to Thee, or Come Ye Sinners have like an octave and a half in them. So no, hymns are not easier to sing than modern worship songs.
And a lot of those hymns were written kind of with 4-part harmony as the intention of how they were going to be sung by the congregation. But that kind of sadly is just a lost part of our culture these days. Like you don't have people learning, okay, I'm a tenor, I'm always going to learn the tenor part, that is something that unfortunately we don't have. So then when people try to sing just melodies, like you said, if you're not a soprano with a good range, it's going to be hard for you to follow along.
Yep. All right, so that's my one not reason out of the way. So now I want to get to the actual reasons to use hymns. The first of which is that hymns don't exist. So I think the best reason to use hymns is that they don't exist.
What do you mean? This is intriguing. How do hymns to not exist?
Well, what we mean by hymns isn't real. So when you say, let's play hymns to anybody, in America right now, they know exactly what that means. That means let's play songs written in America or Europe between 1600 and 1900. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not real. That's just a weird arbitrary division that we made up of songs. Like, the word hymn doesn't mean that at all. The word hymn just means worship song. Like, that's all the word hymn means. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, use them because they don't exist. There is no such thing as a hymn. Every worship song that's been written in the last 2,000 years, from the very first ones to whatever Hillsong just released 2 seconds ago, is a hymn. Like, it's all the same.
Which they literally just released something 2 seconds ago.
I know. I just saw it on my Facebook feed. Yeah. So there was this weird kind of 90s, 2000s. It still goes on, but this result of the worship wars called the blended service. You ever been to a blended service?
I have.
Yeah. So a blended service is basically we have people that disagree on songs in our church. So we're going to play like 3 hymns and 3 modern songs. And it never works. It almost never works. The reason it never works is because it's born out of conflict. So it's just going to keep being conflict. Like, that is not what I want you to do. I'm not saying use hymns. Like, go pick 3 hymns and pick 3 modern songs. Make sure you have them even. That's not really useful at all. What I'm saying is that neither of those should matter. Like, my goal, and hopefully your goal, would be if you go to somebody in your congregation, like, and ask them, well, somebody who pays attention, and ask them, how many hymns did we sing today and how many modern worship songs did we sing today? They should have a hard time answering that question. I think that should be our goal, because we don't want people to think in those terms. We don't want people to think, I need 2 hymns done today and I won't listen to the rest of the worship songs, or vice versa. So that would be my first reason. That Christians have been writing worship for 2,000 years, and all of them are hymns, including the ones written 2 seconds ago, like we just said. So
yeah, I'm looking at the dictionary definition of hymn, and it says a religious song or poem, typically of praise to God or a God. So it's like, I mean, it's all hymns. It's really a question of when there's a debates, it's usually a question of just genre of like the style and stuff like that. So
and when people say hymns, they usually mean, will you please play the songs that I heard when I was 6? That's what that means. I mean, for real.
Yeah, totally.
And in 60 years, we'll be saying, play those hymns like Mighty to Save, and, like.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's really, it is weird to think about when we try to put ourselves in, those shoes, our shoes like a couple decades down the road. Yeah.
All right. So that would be my first reason. The rest of them are a little more not ridiculous, like that one. So the second reason I would have to use hymns in your service is, I would say, the very most important, and that is that many hymns are very theologically rich and theologically deep. Now, there is not a set division. That does not mean that modern songs aren't and that all hymns are, because there's some modern songs that blow hymns out of the water with their theological depth, and there's hymns that are absolutely shallow and terrible. And I've been asked, like, I get requests on Reawaken Hymns to play hymns, and I've had to say no several times, because there are hymns that are just like, I'm not even sure that's a worship song. That's just terrible. Yeah. So you got to be careful, but there are tons of hymns that just have amazing theology behind them. My very favorite hymn of all time, I'll go ahead and say it, is Before the Throne of God Above. And if you read that hymn, like, it's just the gospel. Like, it's just, there's so much in it that it blows my mind. Just this idea of Christ and what he does, and he's the high priest, and our names are graven on his hands, and just, that's like 2 lines, and my mind's blown about how amazing it is. So don't let that go, because it's a hymn, like, you can change the music. You can change, I would not suggest you change the music. We'll talk about that on reason 3. But yeah, I'd rather you do that than not use it, because there's some of them that are just amazing. So I would say our goal for all songs should be to pick songs with great, deep theology, and hymns are a huge part of that.
Yeah, I Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think this might be a place too where kind of like the whole singability issue where people are like, oh, hymns are way more singable than modern songs. Like, okay, maybe in some cases, yes, but not in all cases. And then same thing here, like you said. I think it's safe to say, generally speaking, though, most hymns are more substantive than most modern songs. Like generally speaking, like that.
But of course, that's because they've been weeded out. They've had hundreds of years to pick the good ones. Yeah. We haven't done that yet with modern songs. So
yeah, for sure. And I think, again, like even step back further, it's important for us to have songs that have substantive words, not just for the sake of like what's going to make us look smarter, what's going to make us just sound smarter or something when we're worshiping God. Like it's more of a issue of discipleship and edification of the church. It's not it's just not about like having a wordy song for the sake of having a wordy song that hits on all these theological points, because when we're singing songs in worship, you're going to remember lyrics of songs way more than you're going to remember what your pastor preaches on, right? And that's what's going to get stuck in our congregation's heads, and that's ultimately how they learn, or one of the ways at least they learn the story of the gospel, how they're reminded of the story of the gospel, how they learn different facets of the salvation narrative of, creation, sin, redemption, and so on. Like, and that's where, I think a lot of these hymns, especially I like the ones where you can almost like go through the 4 verses or 5 verses of a hymn and you like it literally tells a story like all together. You can't like really
in Christ alone.
Yeah. In Christ alone is another great one. That's a great one of, it's funny, like we get to the labels of, all worship songs are hymns, but then we have modern hymns, right? Like, so like that's what In Christ Alone, or, so Keith and Chris and Getty, they write some great stuff. Stuart Townsend, something like that. He's another great writer, as well. And one thing, I guess this is another aside I have. I'm sorry, I'm just like sharing all these asides. So number one, like these words are important for edification of the church. And then I'm thinking about like modern hymns. It's like sometimes I feel like there's almost like there's kind of 2 camps of like worship leading right now in the church, at least in the modern church, where like one camp is just like super strong and passionate about like hymns and modern hymns, and like I have a lot of respect for the folks, and like I think they lead, like there's a conference called the Sing Conference. I want to go to that because you have like Keith and Chris and Getty as part of leading that, and so are like the people who are part of the Gospel Coalition as part of that. And then on the other side, we have like the very like innovative worship songwriters, which I would consider innovative, both in a music and almost in a lyrical sense as well. Like I think Joel Houston of Hillsong United, it may be decades or maybe centuries from now, I think he'll be remembered probably for a long time, the legacy he's leaving as a songwriter, just because it's just like he writes some modern stuff. I mean, maybe some of the stuff he wrote for like Hillsong United back in the day was a little hokey, but like there's some songs, especially on their latest albums, that it's like this is a very, very thoughtful song lyrically, and that's, I think it's an example of like how modern songs, like you said, can blow some of the older songs like out of the water theologically. But all that to say,
I have noticed Hillsong doing that. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I have noticed that. I was reading Worship Leaders Collective, that Facebook group that I believe you've recommended, and I will recommend too. Worship leaders should join that. I read a post today, somebody saying like, the new the Hillsong album's got like a communion song, and all the songs are based on scripture. And I'm like, yes, good. Like, and that's a direction that like all worship is going, and it's so wonderful. Like, again, style has nothing to do with the content of your song. Just write good songs with good content, and you can make them any style you want to.
Yeah, and I feel like the content of the modern worship movement is kind of, I feel like it's sort of maturing in a sense.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of it because literally the songwriters are maturing. Like Joel Houston's he's probably in a different place right now than he was 10 years ago, and because he's a pastor, he the guy is a thinker. Like I watched that Hillsong documentary, and like, you know, he just talks about the writing process and how much time and effort he puts into it. And it's just really cool to see that. But it's just interesting too. I just feel like also there's like these two camps right now of like, it's kind of an unspoken tension between like modern hymns, like Getty style, or Hillsong. It's like, but what does it look like, you know, to incorporate those? And I kind of wrestle with that personally, because I'm a fan of both of those worlds. But, you know, some of the one or the other kind of lends itself better to like, okay, I want to have my band have a more like electronic modern sound to it. You know, maybe some of the more, you know, Hillsong kind of lends itself better to that, versus like some of the Getty songs. Like, they're great. Some of them kind of sound hokey in my opinion. Hope that doesn't offend anyone, but like, you know, it's just this balance between like emotional impact with sound and the content, of course, like we said, with words. So that's my little rant about that. I don't know, more me just self-reflecting, I guess, on hymns.
Well, I think that's awesome. And I mean, it's happening right now. Let's be honest. I'm the old stodgy reformed guy, and you're the electronic techno Hillsong guy, and we're talking, and we like each other, and we're friends, and the whole church should be friends like this. Like, come on, guys. Totally. And when I often get comments on Reawaken Hymns like, "Oh, great, you're bringing the hymns back, and we can stop with the modern songs," I'm like, no. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm literally trying to say, hey guys, here's some hymns that sound like modern so that we don't have to think of them as separate anymore, you know? And that's what I want. I just want us to like stop making up these divisions, the tensions like you just said, and let's just play good theologically rich songs and quit like trying to divide everything.
Totally. You know? Cool. Well, let's get to what were we on? Number
that was 2.
That was number 2. All right.
Out of 4. Don't worry, the next 3 are much quicker.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the next two. So reason number 3 is probably obvious to everyone, and that is familiarity. Lots of hymns are familiar with lots of people, and that is not necessarily a reason by itself to play a song. You should not play a song just because it's familiar, but if it's a good song, having it be familiar to people can be a benefit. Worship leaders, I know we all love Christmas because everybody can sing the songs. We're like, yes, everybody knows all the songs. And some hymns are like that all year. Like, if you can get somebody in your church who doesn't know Amazing Grace, I will give you $10. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Or like songs like Come Thou Fount, or Jesus Paid It All, or I Surrender All. Like, most Christians know those songs. So, and that they're good theologically rich songs makes it good that you can have songs that you know people will know, especially if you're a church that gets tons of visitors, like you're by a college campus, or you just get tons of visitors because like Andy Stanley's your pastor. I don't know. But using hymns can be like kind of a welcome to those people. Like, you're not catering your service to those visitors, but you're saying, hey, we know you're here. Here's some stuff you can sing too, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that would be my third.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's like definitely, you know, we're becoming more post-Christian, but there's still a fairly strong like familiarity people have with some of these tunes, and like, you know, but then some of them are just like they are simple like to sing. Like, if you know, Amazing Grace is such a simple tune, memorable one, and so are a lot of other hymns as well. Yeah.
And I do find whenever I'm leading in it, which happens often for me for some reason, in a group of people I've never met before, I'll lean towards a lot of hymns just because I want them to be able to sing with me, and I know they'll probably know them, which is fine, you know. And once I got to know them, we would change it, and we would whatever. But so, like, if you're going to strange situations, hymns can always be a way to kind of, you know, help that. Of course, nowadays, like, you could also play "How Great Is Our God" or "Mighty to Save," and you got a pretty good chance of having somebody know it too. So,
yep, yeah, and I think the only other piece of like the factor to think about is like what, and I really don't know the answer to this, but balancing between the familiarity for believers, for people who have been part of the church world, versus ones who are just non-believers who have no clues. And I think that's where it's like, you know, churches probably like Life Church and North Point, I think they usually stay on the side of the spectrum of like kind of just the modern new stuff. Maybe their bands are writing and stuff like that. Some of them even open with like, I think North Point, I don't know if they still do it. I know Flatirons, they're another one who like they kind of do it once in a while. They do the familiar to Flatiron's church, they do the familiarity thing by like playing
That's
a
a
secular
church?
song as an opener. Yeah.
Flatiron. Sounds like a steakhouse.
I know, right? Flatiron's church. Yeah, because of Flatirons Mountains up here in Colorado.
Oh, I
yeah,
got you. Okay.
Flatiron. Yeah.
I'd be very disappointed if I went to that church and thought it was a steakhouse. I don't know. But. Yeah, I agree with you. I would say on that note, just real quick, that people who aren't Christians that come to your church aren't worshiping because they're not Christian. So to cater to that is kind of like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, that's a valid point. It's like, and we are the idea of the gospel in itself is pretty foreign to pretty much anybody who doesn't know Christ, you know, or even to an extent, like even offensive. So it's like, I don't know, all these weird tensions, man. It's not black and white. A lot of this stuff, it's part of our responsibility, but I think it's good to think about these factors. And cool.
Yeah. All right, last one.
Yep.
I would say a good reason to use hymns is, this one's interesting, is adaptability, which is kind of what we're talking about right now. I think just because the way they were written with 4-part harmony and just written as, you know, like singing, and not necessarily like organized for a band, hymns tend to be better blank slates than modern worship songs do. I've really found this out in Reawaken Hymns. But yeah, a lot of hymns, not all, some are very stylistic, but a lot of hymns can be good blank slates where you can make them sound relevant to whoever you're worshiping with. We can kind of see this when if we both seen the extremes of young people using hymns in worship services and older people trying to use modern songs in services, and one of those always goes better than the other. Mm-hmm. Like, young people don't usually have a problem using hymns because they're blank slates and you can change them. However, like, I've been to a church where there was like an 85-year-old piano player. If I was in the South, I would say bless her heart. And an older, like 85-year-old guy leading, and they're like playing This Is Amazing Grace. And I'm like, I respect you for your choice of trying to change, and that's great, but this sounds ridiculous. So maybe let's, because hymns are much easier to adapt than modern songs. So I would say adaptability is kind of a really fun reason to use hymns, is you can make them whatever you want to. And I get to do that at Reawaken Hymns sometimes, and it's really fun. Like, I mean, Amazing Grace, people have done this, but Amazing Grace can be whatever you want it to. Come Thou Fount can sound, it can be like, I've heard techno versions of Come Thou Fount, like King's Kaleidoscope makes a rock version. There's all kinds of soft versions. Like, you can make them your own, which is really fun to do, and you can't always do with modern songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think modern songs are kind of, maybe hymns are definitely a little bit more timeless. Modern songs are definitely more dependent on kind of whatever genre they were packaged in or style they might have been packed, like, and they're kind of dependent on some of the band arrangements that were included, right? Like, if you don't have that cool synth part at the beginning of This Is Amazing Grace, like, it just doesn't really sound that true to the song. So
I've been trying to play that on acoustic guitar for like 3 years, and I just can't get it.
Oh gosh, cool, man. So what advice then do you give folks who are like, okay, I really feel like I should incorporate more hymnody, or I don't know, I should incorporate more songs that have been around for a while in the church into my church worship setting, and kind of branch out beyond today's top 40 worship songs that were written within the past 2 months. So what advice do you give for folks wanting to do that?
Well, there are tons of practical tips of how to do that. I have some on my website. There's lots of worship leaders and articles about like the specifics of how to do that. I do actually have a video on my website that's a tutorial on how to modernize a hymn, which you can watch that www.reawakenhymns.com. But aside from the practical tips, the biggest one I would say is just try not to use hymns. Like, don't have that as your main thought process. Don't say, I want to include hymns. Say, I want to use good, theologically rich, singable songs, and then use those wherever they come from. Like, and I would be very surprised if some of those were not hymns. Mm-hmm. But just don't divide it when you don't need to. Like, don't do a blended service where you do 3 and do 3. Do a blended service where you have no idea if what you just played is a hymn or not, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's hard. Like, what advice would you give to worship leaders? I see this in the Facebook groups once in a while, where like worship leaders they're kind of navigating the political tension of like older folks maybe come up to them and be like, "Oh, hey, you didn't sing our like expected one hymn a week that we're supposed to get," or stuff like that. I don't know. Like, I don't even know if you thought about that very much or experienced it yourself. Like. How do worship leaders, and maybe it has to be a conversation with their other pastors, like how do churches navigate that, some of those myths about like, oh, only the old school hymns are like the holy ones that we should be singing, and we can maybe stand some of this modern stuff, but as long as we have at least 1 or 2 hymns a week or something like that.
Yeah, so I would say all of us, the worship leaders, the pastors, that person who suggested the hymn, probably all have very similar ideas of the root reasons of why we should worship, like, or what a worship song should look like. So I think it's very important to ask why. If somebody ever asks you, will you do this song? I don't care if it's a hymn or not, say why. Because if they want to do it because, if somebody comes up to me and says, I want to do this song, here's a couple lines that are just like amazing and gospel oriented and stuff, and I will take a hard look at that song and I will probably do it because that's an excellent reason to do a song. If they say, they say this one's really singable and I think people would really be able to sing it well and here's the reasons why, I would say, yeah, let's take a look at it. But if they're just saying like, well, because I used to sing it in my church and I really like it, then you could say, okay, that's great. And maybe buy them a CD with that hymn on it and say, here, you can listen to that in your home. But it's not necessarily what worship is about. And it's hard to do because sometimes you just need an example, and those are hard to find. But I did, in a previous church, I had a woman in the contemporary service. She was, I don't know how old she was, maybe 90s, I'm not sure. But she would sit in the contemporary worship service, and she would not sing a thing because she didn't know any of the songs. And I asked her, I'm like, why are you in the contemporary service? There's literally a traditional one like an hour before this. And she goes, well, I just like seeing all these people worshiping God, and that's how I worship. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, can you preach?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just the attitude change. We have to stop thinking about worship as for ourselves, and just take a look around and realize that it's just edifying and important to the body of Christ as a whole, that we worship and we do so well and we do so with good theology and good singability and all of those things. And that doesn't really help you because to sit down and explain that to that person who suggested the hymn is going to be a long conversation. But to be honest, I don't know better ways to change long-held beliefs like that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think people would be amazed at even a 15 to 30-minute conversation about the why behind everything, that'll help. So it definitely helps just to sit down, talk about it, instead of trying to like have this awkward political tension going on. Like that's not very healthy at all. So cool, man. So what can folks do to keep up with you and what you're up to with Reawaken Hymns?
Well, I just redid my Reawaken Hymns website to make it much more worship leader friendly. So please go check that out. I think you'll enjoy it. I mean, it's free. There's no risk. Just go check it out. There's tons of chord sheets and stuff. So that would be the first thing I would say. Go to my website, and then you can also contact me through that. And then also Reawaken Hymns and Minus Studio are both YouTube ministries, as Churchfront is in many ways. So check them both out on YouTube. Or if you just want to talk to me, just send me an email and we'll talk about whatever you want to. Yeah.
All the links to everything that Nathan just mentioned below in the description of the video, or also in the description or the whatever you call it, the notes for the podcast as well, if you're listening to this on your podcast player. So make sure you go to subscribe to Reawaken Hymns and hit the notification bell, like I always tell you guys, so that you will know right when he releases new stuff for you. And Minus Studio as well. Well, Nathan, thanks so much for your time, man. I think this is a fun conversation, and it actually kind of like made me it kind of convicted my heart a little bit about, I really was like super more passionate about like older hymns a couple years ago too, and like just the whole I always am passionate about content of our songs, but
I don't know, I miss some of these songs, and I feel like I need to even myself like look into this a little bit more. So I'll be checking out your website, reawakenhymns.com. And dude, just keep up the great work. You're doing a lot. I know that a lot of worship leaders are benefiting from the hard work that you're doing to put this stuff online. I know how hard it is to do this online stuff. So, with not a whole lot of at least immediate reward. So keep up the great work, man. And again, if you're listening to this or watching this, make sure you go check out the website.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Nathan Drake and you have a bunch of great practical takeaways to apply to your worship ministry, especially when it comes to incorporating hymns into your worship gatherings. Make sure you click the links below in the video to subscribe to Nathan's YouTube channels and to check out reawakenhymns.com. And if you want some free ambient worship pads for your worship ministry, go download some free pads at churchfrontpads.com. It actually might sound kind of cool to play some of our free churchfront pads underneath some of the hymn arrangements that you'll find from Nathan's website. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Keep up the great work in your ministry. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button, share it with your other friends in ministry, and don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can continue to receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church.